Welcome to Doctorates of the Absurd, your provider of belief on demand.
And thank you for joining us for a deep dive into some source material that, well, today it's less about a roadmap to success and much more about reading the hidden map of your own existence.
That's right.
We're really trying to look beneath the surface of the human experience to find sort of the operating manual for your life. And it's a manual that says you're not composed of simple chapters, but of these invisible dynamic lines.
Absolutely. Our sources today are drawn from this incredibly insightful philosophical analysis that breaks down three crucial novellas. We're talking Henry James, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Pierre Fluccio. And our goal here really is to give you a new kind of cartography for human life, to force us all to ask, what if the divisions in your life, fortune, misfortune, change, stagnation, what if they're dictated by forces you can't even see?
Forces that operate at speeds beyond your ordinary perception.
Exactly. We're talking about the three lines of life.
And our mission for this deep dive is to give you a genuine shortcut to being well-informed about the nature of personal change. We want to help you understand these invisible forces that govern your life.
Right.
Forces that divide it not by, simple calculated segments like career stage or marital status, but by these hidden lines that are constantly being drawn and redrawn.
And we want to start with the hook, the kind of provocative, counterintuitive question that just makes you stop and look at yourself sideways. It makes you question your own understanding of freedom.
Okay.
So here it is. Why is the most successful escape from your past not a heroic jailbreak, but learning how to paint yourself gray on gray?
That's good.
That's the core tension we're exploring, isn't it? The difference between trying to break out and simply ceasing to be recognizable to the system that trapped you in the first place.
That tension, that feeling you just described, that really is the existential itch this whole analysis is trying to scratch.
Yeah.
We feel, I think all of us feel constantly, that we are being calculated, measured, controlled by these rigid structures.
A job, the mortgage.
The social media profile, all of it. And yet at the same time, we're subject to these completely ungraspable micro-level changes that are happening deep inside us.
Yeah.
Changes that we can't even articulate and know they've already pushed us past some kind of breaking point.
It's that nagging problem of being trapped between two demands that just don't fit together. The world demands we be rigid, recognizable, predictable.
A clear identity, a defined segment.
Right. But then this other life, this anonymous, intense life we might be living underneath it all, that demands we change constantly, secretly, without permission.
And that leads us straight to the high stakes here.
Yes.
The villain, you could say, is the misconception that life just proceeds linearly through these clear, controllable chapters.
And if we ignore this kind of philosophical map...
Well, if we ignore it, we stay trapped on what the source material calls the rigid, predetermined paths of life. We risk mistaking a simple segment, switch, a career change, a new city for true transformation.
I see. So you think you're escaping, but you're just trading one box for another.
Precisely. You lose the possibility of inventing that ultimate prize, the irretrievable line of self-creation, which is really the purest kind of freedom described in this material.
Okay, so before we map out these lines, we need to frame the conversation. And the sources give us this crucial distinction, the difference between the tale and the novella.
Yes, and this isn't just about literature. It's a way of organizing time and perception in your present moment. It really dictates what you're looking for in your own life.
So how does that work?
Well, think about the different ways you can process time. The tale asks a simple question. What is going to happen?
Right, it's forward-looking.
It's a movement that inherently draws the present forward into the future. It's all about discovery, unfolding, development. If you're watching a tale, the tension comes from the things that are about to be revealed.
It's concerned with the matter of the secret. Who did it?
Exactly. The tale is always what the source calls a first tale. It opens up a path.
But the novella is different.
Completely different. It asks, what happened? Whatever could have happened. It doesn't look forward to a discovery. It casts the present instantly into the past. It deals with secrecy, with envelopments, with postures.
It's a last novella.
Always. It's concerned with the aftermath of an event that you might not have even noticed happening.
What's so fascinating here is that this isn't just about past versus future, is it? It's about the movement that animates the present moment.
That's the key insight. The novella deals with something unknowable, something truly imperceptible, something that played on what the source calls fundamental forgetting.
So the power lies in realizing something has irrevocably shifted, but you can't name the exact moment it happened.
Yes, and that connects directly to the content of the secret itself. In a tale, we're waiting for the matter of the secret, who committed the crime, who's the real heir, you
The
know.
big reveal.
But in the novella, the matter is often banal, it's irrelevant, or it's objectively unknowable. What matters is the form of the secret. It remains impenetrable. Something has happened, even if that something was, well, nothing at all. It's a sort of inverse suspense.
So if you live your life like a tale, you're focused on goals, on the matter.
Achieving clear, defined goals. But if you live it as a novella, you're focused on the subtle, anonymous shifts in intensity that are constantly redistributing your desires and your allegiances. You're focused on the form.
And when a master of that form, like Fitzgerald, asks himself whatever could have happened for things to have come to this, he's using that novella lens.
He is. He's perceiving the present moment as already over, as already having happened, which forces us, the readers, you, the listener, to ask, what little blood vessel in my perception could have ruptured?
What is this nothing that suddenly makes everything happen?
Exactly. And the ability to perceive that shift. That's the difference between being trapped in a rigid fate and finding the capacity for true flight.
Okay, let's slow down a bit and unpack this idea of lines. The material argues that we're all composed of lines, and not symbolic lines, right? These are lines of force, of luck, of misfortune that run through our lives.
Real lines. And there are three fundamental types. Understanding how they constantly interfere with each other, how they operate, that's the core of this deep dive.
So at the heart of this whole analysis is a core binary.
Yes, the tension between structures that control us, the large fixed systems the source calls Molar, and on the other hand, the forces that resist or dismantle that control, the tiny shifting dynamics that are called molecular.
Okay, I have to stop you there because those words, molar and molecular, they sound really dense, really academic. Can we nail down this binary? Let's say my life is a modern corporation. What's molar and what's molecular?
That's a great question because it's not about chemistry. It's about scale and organization. So the molar level in your corporation is the bureaucracy. It's the rigid hierarchy, the quarterly budget.
The HR manual, the job title.
The job title, exactly. It's the whole structure that's designed to ensure predictability.
Okay, so what's the molecular level?
The molecular level is the office gossip. It's the illicit coffee breaks, the unspoken alliances that form, the tiny movements of dissent or desire that run just beneath the surface, often completely undetected by management.
I see. So both are real, but only the molar is, like, calculable on a spreadsheet.
Precisely. And that brings us to the hidden mechanism, the rule that governs this whole system. These three lines are not independent stages you just pass through one by one.
It's not a linear progression.
No, not at all. They continually interfere. They react upon each other. They intermingle. No single line is transcendent. They have what the source calls a mutual immanence.
So you're living all three at the same time, but maybe you're favoring one or being forced onto one path at any given time.
You've got it. So let's systematically define the toolkit. Let's start with the line you probably spend, say, 90% of your waking life on.
Rigid segmentarity, the molar line. Let's try a cocktail party definition for this. This is the path of life where everything is divided into clear, predictable, calculable boxes. It's like the train schedule of your existence.
The passage from student to intern, from renter to homeowner, from single to married.
Yeah.
This line pertains to what they call molar aggregates. States, institutions, classes, professions. It governs all our feelings when they're defined as fixed relations between people. Being a mother, being a citizen, being middle class.
And the segments all fit together in a way that's supposed to be predictable.
Conjugal and predictable, leading to these clear, over-significant binary choices, pass-fail, rich-poor, success-failure. The point is that these choices are pre-coded. The system already recognizes them.
So the minute you accept a job title, you're on a rigid line. The minute you sign a lease, you are on a rigid line.
And there's tenderness and security there, for sure. But its defining feature is that it prevents true becoming. It provides you with a future, but it's a future that is entirely calculable based on your current segment.
Okay, so that's the first one. What's next?
Exactly. Now, the next one is the trickiest and I think the most fascinating because it operates right under the radar.
Supple segmentation, the molecular line. Okay, the cocktail party definition for this one. These are the invisible, ungraspable microchanges, the tensions, the desires that constantly shift and redistribute our internal landscape. And they operate below the radar of big events.
Think of it like this. Imagine tiny, fine cracks forming deep inside a porcelain dish when everything on the surface seems perfectly fine. You can't see them yet, but they're a signal of eventual rupture.
I like that.
This line is marked by what the source calls quanta of deterritorialization, these microscopic shifts or micromovements. It travels at speeds beyond our ordinary thresholds of perception.
So it's that feeling of drift, that slow, imperceptible corrosion of belief in a system, or maybe the development of some intense, silent obsession.
Yes, and if you try to talk about it on the rigid line, it just sounds banal. It sounds like, I just don't feel fulfilled.
It's the form of the secret, then, independent of the matter. It's not about what you're hiding, but the intense internal movement of hiding itself, the micro-infractions.
That's it. It's the sub-conversation running underneath every single interaction. It's filled with silences, allusions, hasty innuendos that, if you analyze them in court, would mean absolutely nothing.
But they felt incredibly significant in the moment.
Exactly. And this line is the fulcrum. It is inherently ambiguous. It's ready to tip toward rigid control, a blockage that causes you to revert to the safest segment
Or toward the final, radical type of line.
which brings us to the most dangerous and also the most creative possibility.
The line of flight. The abstract line. For a cocktail party, I'd say this is a total, irretrievable rupture. A clean break that causes the past to literally cease to exist. It leads to absolute deterritorialization and true self-invention.
It's like drilling a hole in a rigid pipe so the entire system leaks out, never to be recovered.
Wow.
This line is non-segmentary. It's the exploding of the other two lines. It requires you to become imperceptible oneself, to dismantle oneself in order to become nobody.
So this isn't just quitting your job.
No, it's quitting the entire way you organize your life around the idea of work. This line is both deadly and intensely alive. It has no model, no chance of success. It must be invented by effectively drawing it in your life. It's like an abstract arrow crossing the void.
And that's the key distinction, right? Rigid segmentation is predictable, supple segmentation is ambiguous, but the line of flight is irretrievable. It's the point of no return.
That's the one.
But how can we tell the difference between these concepts in actual human behavior? I feel like we need to see them in action.
I agree. Let's do that.
Okay, so let's ground these three concepts, rigid, supple, and flight, in our first case study. Henry James's novella, In the Cage. This story, it just perfectly illustrates that brutal transition from a molar existence to a purely molecular internal life.
And then the leap into the abstract that follows.
Right. So the heroine is this young telegrapher. Her initial existence is, it's the textbook definition of rigid segmentarity.
Her entire world is quantified. She's counting words, checking addresses, handling transactions one after the other, day after day. Her identity is completely tied to her molar aggregate. She is a telegraphist.
And her fiancé is a grocer. They're just these clearly defined social entities.
Her physical reality even mirrors this rigidity. Her post office cage is literally right next to his grocery store. It's a perfect contiguity of territory.
And he's constantly plotting their future, their furniture, their vacations, their house.
Yes. Their segments fit together perfectly. They're conjugal. They have a future, for sure, but they have no becoming. This is what James shows us, is the line of macropolitics determined aggregates focused entirely on a calculable future.
But then the system gets challenged. There's a molecular intrusion.
A wealthy, fashionable couple starts using the post office all the time. They're sending these coded, complex, multiple telegrams, often using pseudonyms or elliptical phrasing. This is the introduction of the second line.
A supple flow.
Marked by quanta, these small, intense moments of meaning that are grasped right at the moment of their birth on an intensive, not an extensive, scale.
And the telegraphist, just through sheer exposure and this intense focus, she develops what the source calls a prodigious talent for interpretation.
And a passionate complicity with the rich man involved.
Yeah.
She starts grasping the microsegmentations running underneath the rigid surface of their class difference.
But here's the critical philosophical shift, and this gets back to what you said earlier. James is no longer interested in the matter of the secret.
Right. If the rich man was having an affair or committing a financial crime, the matter, it's frankly banal. It's just another segment. James is focused on the form of the secret, which has been molecularized, made unassignable, traveling at speeds beyond ordinary perception.
Hold on. If the matter of the secret is completely irrelevant, why does she care so intensely about the form? What is she actually interpreting? If the message is just meet me at 3, but it's signed with a code, why does the code matter more than the meeting?
Because the code, the pseudonym, the repeated pattern of messages, that is the flow of desire and risk, independent of the goal. She's interpreting the plot. She's interpreting the intensity, the speed, and the direction of their desire.
So she realizes her reality is made of two entirely different types of relations operating at the same time.
Exactly. There are the intrinsic relations of couples, the Molar ones, her and her fiancé, the rich man and his wife, and then there are these less localizable relations that concern flows and particles that elude those classes and persons.
The molecular.
The molecular. She starts seeing this molecular life in terms of doubles rather than cools, because the double is the self you invent in that molecular flow.
And she becomes afraid of her alternate self, who might be waiting outside the cage.
Her intense molecular life doesn't just rival her life with her fiancé. It runs parallel. It's subterranean. It's a whole micropolitics unfolding purely in the space of that post office cage. She's extracting intense life from the tiny act of deciphering an illusion.
But this intense molecular activity, it reaches a maximum quantum, a limit of endurance. She realizes the fragility of that supple line.
And the molecular relationship eventually dissolves because nothing happened. It just hit the limit of supple segmentarity. The man marries the now widowed lady. The telegraphist marries her grocer fiancé. They all revert to their rigid aggregates.
But here's the magnificent paradox. They reverted to the rigid segment, and yet everything has fundamentally changed for her.
She has been propelled toward the third line, absolute deterritorialization. The molecular tension having run its course, it basically drilled a hole that allows her to break through that rigid wall. She has reached a line of flight that no longer tolerates segments.
And the climax is captured perfectly in that quote from the source material. She ended up knowing so much that she could no longer interpret anything. There were no longer shadows to help her see more clearly, only glare.
Interpretation, her molecular talent, it becomes useless when the lines of flight are non-segmentary. She's reached a state of literal, pure movement.
She becomes imperceptible because she has nothing left to hide.
She dismantled her need for the secret's form, and in doing so, she dismantled herself to finally be alone, or rather, to finally meet her true double, the one capable of loving on that abstract line.
And this is the highest expression of that clandestine movement we started with, to paint oneself gray on gray.
It's the Kierkegaardian knight of the faith, who looks exactly like a suburban bourgeois person going to the post office. But internally, he's moving on a line no one suspects. He constantly produces finite segments, yes, but he is already moving non-segmentarily, irretrievably.
Present but invisible.
Exactly. The takeaway from James is that the molecular activity isn't an end in itself. It's the engine that fuels the radical break. When the segments of the molar life are fully saturated with the intensity of the molecular life, the only outcome is either collapse back into rigidity or a clean break toward flight.
And the telegraphist chose the latter. She transformed her life from a predictable line into an irretrievable arrow crossing the void.
So now we move to F. Scott Fitzgerald. He used the novella form precisely to capture this aftermath, always asking whatever could have happened for things to have come to this. He is concerned, above all else, with the process of breaking down.
And Fitzgerald observes that all life is a process of breaking down. But he distinguishes three precise ways this happens, and they map perfectly onto our three lines. First, there's the standard rigid breakdown.
Right, these are the big sudden blows that come or seem to come from outside.
They proceed by these over-significant molar breaks: loss of wealth, public scandal, alcoholism, aging.
The failure of conjugality, where the blame is clearly assignable. And this kind of breakdown, it leads to increasing rigidification. You try to recover by returning to your old segments, forcing yourself back into recognizable societal categories.
But they just feel older, heavier, and more demanding.
Exactly.
The second way is the far more insidious molecular crack-up. This is the cracking as in a dish.
These happen when things seem fine on the molar level. You're still successful, you're still married, the checks are clearing. But on this subterranean line, the self that awaited something is already dead. Or maybe the self that would await it hasn't arrived yet.
It's that feeling of spiritual hollowness, while outwardly you're presenting as completely functional.
It's the rhizomatic subterranean line of molecular changes and redistributions of desire that have been occurring without any noise, below the threshold of social perception. It's so disquieting because nothing assignable or perceptible has happened, yet you know your core has fractured.
You only realize it suddenly, in a flash of despair, but it's been happening almost without you knowing it through these tiny incremental shifts.
Yes, and this hidden cracking leads us to the third type of rupture, the clean break. But the sources warn us that this is fundamentally different from a typical escape.
Fitzgerald makes a vital, sharp distinction here. The true rupture is not an escape or running away. He calls that an excursion in a trap.
I love that phrase. Think about a spectacular jailbreak where you run hundreds of miles, only to realize the rigid segments of money, housing, and documentation force you right back into a new, slightly different cage. Or eventually, right back to the old one.
We're constantly told in self-help culture to escape or run away to find ourselves. But the source warns that even a voyage to the South Seas is often just a return to rigid segmentarity. You end up meeting your daddy and mommy far away.
You carry the segments with you. The true line of flight is fundamentally different because it is irretrievable. It makes the past literally cease to exist. The matter of the past is just volatilized.
The form of what happened, that imperceptible something, it no longer even exists because you've abandoned the structure that was required to define it.
Exactly.
That sounds terrifying. The consequence of achieving this true flight is profound. You lose face, you lose form, you lose matter, you become no more than a line. If I dismantle myself, my face, my identity, how is that functionally different from just giving up and letting entropy take over?
It's the difference between dissolution and invention. Giving up is often a crash back into a rigid segment, being defined by your alcoholism or your depression, for example. The line of flight is an active and invented deterritorialization.
So you become imperceptible and clandestine in a motionless voyage.
You're saved by and for love, paradoxically, by abandoning both conventional love and the old self. You gain the ability to make everybody the whole world of becoming. You enter becoming's animal, becoming's molecular, and finally, becoming's imperceptible.
You paint the world on yourself, creating the map rather than being painted by the world.
Beautifully put. And yet, despite this radical transformative potential, Fitzgerald notes the singular despair that sometimes comes with this line of rupture. Even after achieving this freedom, the ultimate clean break, he ends one of his reflections with that strikingly grim acceptance.
I will try to be a correct animal, though, and if you throw me a bone with enough meat on it, I may even lick your hand.
Chilling, isn't it?
Yeah. Why does absolute deterritorialization, true freedom, carry a risk of despair that looks so much like total resignation?
Because the line of flight is deadly as well as alive. It demands a profound loss of familiar footing. You become an abstract line, crossing the void, and that requires an immense strength, an ability to withstand intensity.
And if you're overtaxed?
If you're overtaxed, the line of flight bounces off the wall, it falls into a black hole, and it reverts to the most rigid segments possible. That resignation Fitzgerald describes is the danger of a failed line of flight. Total submission to being a correct animal after attempting to become an arrow crossing the void.
So if you try to escape, but you fail to make it irretrievable, you risk becoming more rigid and more resigned than if you had never tried at all.
The stakes of that clean break are absolute.
Okay, so this framework isn't just personal or literary, it's intensely political and perceptual. Our third novella, from Pierrette Fluccio, The Story of the Abyss and the Spyglass, it expands this cartography onto the entire social scale. It shows us how state power imposes the rigid line and how the molecular line resists it.
The novella sets up this scenario around a great black hole, the abyss, which is encircled by segments where lookouts are watching for infractions and disturbances. And these lookouts are divided into two camps, which perfectly represent the molar and the molecular political scales.
On one side, we have the near-seers. They represent macropolitics and rigid segmentarity. They're the enforcers of the system.
They use a simple spyglass to see gigantic cells, great binary divisions. The classroom, the barracks, the low-income housing project, the corporate cubicle farm. They see the fixed striae and columns, the lines that organize life under control.
And when they spot a misshapen figure or a flow that doesn't fit the segments, they bring out this terrible instrument, the cutting telescope.
This machine isn't used for observation. It's used for imposition. It emits a laser beam that's designed specifically to cut out shapes and restore the momentarily threatened molar order.
That is a powerful, dark metaphor. What does the cutting telescope represent in modern life? Is it just the police state, or is it something more pervasive?
It's the imposition of binary geometry itself. It symbolizes the state affair, the rigid geometrical imposition of control. It's the endless bureaucratic form that's designed to force your messy life into two simple checkboxes.
It overcodes everything.
It overcodes everything. It acts on flesh and blood, our bodies, our careers, but it itself is nothing but pure geometry, an abstract line of control imposed from above. It cuts out the molecular activity and restores the calculable segment.
And the source is insistent that this isn't a metaphor. It's about effectively drawing a line of rigid segmentarity, along which everyone will be judged and rectified according to their contour.
You must fit the shape, or the telescope will cut you until you do.
Okay, so then there are the farseers.
Yes, and they use these long-distance, complex telescopes. They see the micropolitics, they see a whole microsegmentarity, details of details, a roller coaster of possibilities, tiny movements, and segments that move by jerks.
A rhizome of molecular segmentarity.
Exactly.
Okay.
This is the flow of anonymous resistance, the underground stream of desire.
And this molecular line, the rhizome, it can't be easily overcoded by the cutting telescope because it has no fixed shape. It's just unfindable particles, anonymous segmentation that challenges everything all the time without a clear goal or a recognizable leader. This is the answer to that Novella question. What happened?
And the source notes that biology operates in a similar way. Large cellular divisions, the molar aggregates, are cross-cut underneath by molecular lines of migration, invaginations, and morphogenetic impulses. We are literally drawing lines, biological, personal, and political, not just speaking symbolically.
The tragedy here, though, is the ambiguity of the farseers. They detect the microinfractions and the dreadful damage caused by the cutting telescope, but they know their warnings are useless because the molar order will always be restored in the short term.
They vacillate. They're stuck between collaboration with the rigid segments and sympathy for the subterranean molecular activity. They are stuck in that ambiguous middle ground.
So the only way out for them.
It's strongly hinted that the only way out for the farseer is to abandon the position of observer, to smash the telescope, and depart on a line of flight to meet a blind double approaching from the other side.
So true. Non-segmentary rupture, a refusal to participate in the act of observation and classification.
That's the only true relief from the ambiguity.
And this brings us to the conceptual lens that's used throughout the source material, schizoanalysis. This framework provides the philosophical toolkit for mapping these lines in a practical way.
Schizoanalysis doesn't focus on elements or aggregates or on subjects or structures. It pertains only to the lineaments, the lines running through groups and individuals. And the conceptual linchpin, the one that often trips up readers, is the body without organs, BWO.
Okay, let's make the BWO practical. Let's try the cocktail party definition of the body without organs. It's the common body, or abstract surface, upon which all these lines, territorialities, deterritorializations, reterritorializations, are inscribed.
It's the abstract, untapped potential surface of your life, the possibility map that hasn't been drawn yet.
So if the molar line is my social ID, my passport,
Then the BWO is your pre-ID state, the circus where your potential lines of flight can be drawn. It's an abstract line with neither imaginary figures nor symbolic functions. All of these lines, rigid, supple, flight, are inscribed on the BWO.
so the core practical question of schizoanalysis becomes, what is your BWO? What map are you making or rearranging? It's a pragmatic analysis of your life forces.
It is entirely pragmatic. The lines themselves mean nothing conceptually. They are not symbolic or imaginary. The source states very clearly that structures, which are closed systems of points and positions, are designed precisely to prevent escape.
They assign meaning to block movement.
And the lineaments have nothing to do with language or a signifier. The lines precede language. It is language that has to follow the lines that are being drawn on the body without organs.
Like with James's telegraphist, when she reaches a state of glare instead of shadows, her language becomes literal, non-symbolic.
Exactly. And this is why schizoanalysis is immediately practical and intensely political. Politics precedes being. Practice doesn't come after you establish the terms. It actively participates in the drawing of the lines. We are composed of lines, and the fundamental political question is whether they're imposed on us.
The rigid line.
Whether they sprout by chance,
The molecular.
or whether they're invented and effectively drawn by us. The line of flight.
We've mapped the three lines, rigid, supple, flight, and we've seen them operating in isolation and in these political control scenarios. But the real action, the ultimate payoff, it happens in their composition, in their collision. We need to see them interacting simultaneously.
I agree. But before we get to the final synthesis, we have to fully address the crucial final problems that are outlined in the text. The inherent dangers that arise when these lines interact, especially when you attempt flight.
Okay, let's focus on the danger of flight. We established that the line of flight is how new weapons are invented, how empires fall, how true creation happens. But the source warns that if that flight isn't irretrievable, it's capable of the worst, most rigid results.
It's the black hole effect. The line of flight can bounce off the wall, fall into a black hole of inertia, and revert to the most rigid segment imaginable. The specific example given is the person who sows their wild oats.
Right.
That apparent escape or rebellion, if it fails to be a true rupture, can often result in a life that is more rigid, more defined by the categories of failure, addiction, or regret than the life that was escaped. The past doesn't cease to exist, it just reasserts itself with more force.
That's horrifying. It suggests that a failed revolution leads to an even more brutal dictatorship.
Precisely. The system adapts.
Mm.
And then there's the danger of incompatibility, even between successful lines of flight. The lines are not always compossible. The source warns it can happen in love that one person's creative line is the other's imprisonment.
Wow. That brings a complexity into high relief. So two people might both be pursuing a creative line of flight, a break from their past, but their respective lines might require the total demolition of the relationship.
And in doing so, they trap the other person in a rigid, abandoned segment. The composition of these lines, even in positive movements, is highly, highly problematic.
So let's use a quick analogy to solidify this before we get to the final case study. We can build on that computer analogy.
Let's do it. If your life is a digital system,
Then the rigid segmentarity is the operating system, the OS. It's the fixed, hierarchical, security-controlled structure. Everything is calculable and contained.
the supple segmentation would be the low-level code or the background processes, the hidden changes in memory allocation, micro-updates, or maybe virus operating below the user interface. Tiny movements that don't change the OS surface, but can compromise or reroute data flows.
And the line of flight. That's the full, clean system wipe. The installation of an entirely new architecture, a clean break. It's irretrievable. The past OS ceases to exist.
That really helps us see the complexity. You have to maintain the OS, the molar social segments, enough to function, but you have to allow the subterranean change, the molecular, without collapsing the whole thing into a black hole, which is failed flight.
And the source gives us the ultimate synthesis of all three lines operating simultaneously. Perfectly illustrated not in fiction, but in the tragic, compelling life of F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda.
Their relationship is the final lesson in this cartography.
It's the perfect crucible because they were judged by two machines at the same time, which reveals the conflict between the molar interpretation and the molecular reality.
So first you have the rigid segmentarity, the couple. This is the 50-50 judgment of friends and family, the binary machine that's trying to assign rights and wrongs, blame and identity.
It forces them into the categories of husband and wife, drunkard and madwoman. The social world demanded a clear, segmented answer. My drinking drove her mad versus her madness drove me to drink.
This is the molar line. Their friends were unanimous that they would have been better off without each other, that the segments should be separated and defined. This rigid analysis tried to psychoanalyze their problems using these clear, over-significant molar breaks.
Then second, we have the supple segmentation, the double. This is the subterranean line of their shared, tacit understanding.
It's the intensely molecular life they extracted from the very acts that were destroying their molar segments, the shared chaos, the intellectual intimacy that transcended their diagnoses and their social failures.
They multiplied a double at the limit of their endurance. They were communicating through these internal messages that eluded their social class and even their doctors.
It was the shared molecular flow, the intense, secret, unassignable form of their relationship that kept them bound even when the molar segments of husband and wife were tearing apart.
Which brings us finally to the line of flight, the clandestine. Despite physical separation, self-destruction, and the unanimous molar judgment of the world, they found themselves, according to Fitzgerald, never more in love.
They achieved a shared line of flight, all the more successful now that nothing had importance any longer.
The profound realization, which just cuts through all the binary judgments of the molar world, is that they had been destroyed, but not by each other.
They became imperceptible in the A&D that made them a line of flight. They moved without a clear conjunction or disjunction, but as a line, forever in the process of being drawn toward a new abstract acceptance, the opposite of resignation.
It is the ultimate payoff of this cartography. You can be in a rigid segment, separated, diagnosed, judged, while simultaneously operating on an intense molecular line, which is finally propelled toward an abstract line of clandestine survival, one that transcends the very definition of your molar identity.
And that profound realization, the one that makes all the philosophical jargon suddenly concrete and heartbreakingly real, that gives us the mic drop quote that summarizes everything we've covered today. It's the ultimate defense against the binary machines of the world.
We destroyed ourselves, but in all honesty, I never thought we destroyed each other.
So we set out with a mission to give you a new cartography of life by dissecting these three novellas, moving beyond simple chapters in linear narratives to see the rigid controls, the invisible microcracks, and the potential for irretrievable flight.
And hopefully this discussion has provided you with a new set of tools to read the movements that are animating your present. The lines are not merely symbolic, they are real, running through groups, individuals, and entire societies, imposing segments or offering vectors of escape.
The crucial takeaway from the lens of schizoanalysis is this. These lines are inscribed on your body without organs, the abstract map of your life's potential. Your life isn't a fixed structure or a stable identity. It's a map that's being drawn, continually being rearranged.
We have to invent our lines of flight and draw them effectively.
Or risk having them imposed upon us, or worse, having them crash back into the most rigid, most regretful segments.
We talked about how the analysis of desire schizoanalysis is immediately practical and intensely political. And it brings us back to the most fundamental question when you look at your own life map. What kind of movement defines you right now? Are you on a segment, a sub-conversation, or a clean break?
The question is not who you are or what you want, because those are molar segments that are easily assigned by the system. The truly powerful question is this: what abstract line will you draw, and at what price, for yourself and for others? Think about which of your segments are molar and demanding your predictability, which of your internal routines are molecular and silently shifting your allegiances, and what, if anything, are you willing to irretrievably deterritorialize in order to draw your own clean break?
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us into the cartography of the self. We'll see you next time for more Doctorates of the Absurd.